So, good evening. Govinda suggested me to talk about Krishnamurti and yoga. I have to confess, I have no idea where to start from. I have no idea where to go. I need your help. Where do we go? What is your interest? Because I really don't know how to manage this topic. So, what does interest you in this topic? And we'll start from there, because here again, I have no idea what to say.
The way I understand,
I need your help.
Krishnamurti's teachings mainly talk about the silence of the mind, and yoga also has the ultimate aim of yoga is also silence and quietening of the mind. So, do they have anything in common as far as the approach is concerned, or as far as the aim is concerned of the teachings, as well as the yoga philosophy, yoga principles?
Okay, that's one point. Silence of the mind. Well, thank you.
One more point, and I'm a beginner to Krishnamurti's teachings. So, in most of his teaching, he talks about the mind, not the body. So, it's hardly a lot.
He talks, of the mind?
He talks mostly about mind awareness, but not so much of the physical body. But yoga has a lot to do both with the body and the mind. So maybe how does that compare? Is it really even important to think about the body in yoga? So that aspect might be important.
Okay, that's the second point.
Maybe if you can paraphrase, then we'll get recorded.
No, it's okay. So, if there is a relation in between when Krishnamurti is talking about silence in the mind, and yoga is about also, some parts of yoga are talking about silence in the mind. And second point is, as Krishnaji is mainly talking about the mind, and we have the idea that yoga has to do with the body. Is there a link in between? What else?
So we know that Krishnamurti used to practice yoga on a daily basis. That's what I've heard. So what was the role that yoga played in his life? Or how did that help in whatever he was thinking about?
Was the role body yoga played in Krishnamurti's life?
Yeah.
Well, maybe we should send in an email.
And also,
But I have some information about this. Yeah.
in his public talks, why was Krishnamurti critical of the yoga, the way it is taught? What was his main criticism about? Because sometimes I think we miss, what he was critical about. Because sometimes he talks greatly about Raja Yoga, but many times in his public talks he is quite critical also. So what was his criticism about?
This I know a little bit. Why and how Krishnamurti was criticizing yoga, even if he was sometimes talking about Raja Yoga. Okay, we have a few points. Some others?
Also to do with meditation, maybe, because yoga and meditation, we talk about that they are quite interlinked, with but I believe Krishnamurti ji always used to say that there is no specific way of meditating. If you are in it completely, whatever you are doing, that is meditating. So how that meditation and then the way we do meditation, kind of sit quietly and just close our legs, and so how is that different, and how is yoga meditation different?
So you mean, how do yoga meditation match with Krishnamurti when using the word meditation? That's a big thing. So, there are different yoga traditions, or there are different yoga paths. And there are mainly two that were today that are called classical yoga, or another path which is called Tantra yoga. So classical yoga is a mixture, or is presenting different types of yoga. So first of all, we have a difficulty with the word yoga itself, because when reading the commenters, sometimes they take it as using the word as a goal, sometimes as a way. So when they use it as a goal, there are 17 definitions in the Bhagavad Gita. So one definition upon which whole traditions agree comes from a text called Yoga Sutras, which is around 2,000 years old. Nobody knows precisely. We don't know if the author was a person or a group, or if it is just a name. It is called Patanjali, but we don't know if Patanjali really existed. It seems not, but that's a big question today. So into this text, at the right beginning, there is a definition of the goal. And it can be understood as yoga that would mean a state of unity, which means, if we try to find meaning what that Krishnamurti was talking about, unity means no division, no fragmentation, no separation. That's where they mean the same thing. Now, in this sutra, what is explained, there are very short, always very short sentences. It says that state of unity, or that state of non-fragmentation, comes when the mind is completely silent. It has become very famous today, and so the Sanskrit say, yoga chitta vritti nirodha. So, at the right beginning, it gives an indication that that state of non-fragmentation comes when the mind is silent, when there is no activity. Once again, there are many translations, there are hundreds of translations of this little sutra, but it always comes more or less at that. In this classical yoga, it is said that there are different paths, and this classical yoga is understood as bringing all of the different paths together. So these paths have to do with action, what they call karma yoga, with, we could say, intelligence, jnana yoga, with compassion, bhakti yoga, and with energy, kundalini yoga. So all these different all of them are very typical points Krishnamurti was talking about. You know, when he was talking about intelligence, jnana, or compassion, bhakti, or action, if you remember, and from time to time he used to talk about an immense endless energy, which in the classical yoga is called Kundalini energy. So I'm not talking about the process, but just the meaning of the words. And all of those are called Raja Yoga, which means King Yoga. So when we take the different parts of Raja Yoga, Krishnamurti used to talk of all these four things. Once again, energy, intelligence, compassion, and action. That's the main ideas where we can say that Krishnamurti talks were matching with yoga. Now, classical yoga. When it comes to tantric yoga, it's completely different. It has a lot of mythology, it has a lot of symbolism. It says that within the human being, there is a quality of consciousness, and is a quality of perception, which has no activity, it only perceives. And then there is another quality, which is called Shakti, which means energy or action. And in this Tantra Yoga, what is meant is that it is possible for a human being to develop this energy so that it will kind of bring to consciousness is fullness. And consciousness will be active by itself, which again has been a theme that Krishnamurti taught quite a lot. And when he said, he doesn't really always use the word consciousness, but he said, perception is action. Consciousness is action. That is, there is nothing to do with the thought, because consciousness is action by itself. And if you remember, he used to say that brings order. So these are the different things that could be put together when we come to Krishnamurti's vocabulary when he was giving talks. And the main points that the different two types of yoga were or are about. Now, coming back to the classical yoga, which is the one that Krishnamurti was taking in account sometimes when he gave talks. He never talked about tantric yoga. He used to consider that was fancy things. You might remember one day into a question and answer. In those days, questions were written, piece of paper, and paper were given to him. Long before it was direct question, but this has been stopped. So one day he received a paper, and the question was something about what do you think or what do you perceive about this Kundalini yoga? And before answering, you can hear him saying, not loud at all, say, "What a silly question."
What did he say?
What a silly question.
What a silly question.
Just uttering. You can hear it on the recordings. So apparently he never gave importance to what we call Tantra Yoga. That is this enhancing of energy through willpower. That's very important in Tantra Yoga. Enhancing energy through willpower for expanding the perception or expanding the consciousness. So apparently he didn't give any value to this. As far as I know, I've never heard him talking about it. Now, coming back to Raja Yoga, this Raja Yoga is called Ashtanga. So, today there is a new fashion that was born not very far from here in Mysore, from a man who is teaching something that he called Ashtanga Yoga. Nothing to do with him. That's he just picked up a word and used it for his own thing. So, Ashtanga Yoga, Ashta means 8. I suppose you all know this. And so it's 8 parts. And it can also be understood as 8 entrances or 8 doors to the state of non-fragmentation, of unity. The first states have to do with morality, which is once again something upon which Krishnamurti so much insisted, to live a life with morality. So there are 10 different points. 5 of them have to do with, I could say, a personal, ethical way of life within oneself. And the 5 others have to do with ethical into the relationships. So here again, there is those things match together. When Krishnamurti is, how much he was talking about relationships and say that it is through relationship that we can discover or we can inquire. But you have to be very clear-minded as a person, that is to have developed, or at least, to develop inner qualities, ethical qualities, and also to maintain ethical qualities in the relationship with the other person, or the outside in general. So from the right beginning in the Yoga Sutras, this is very much stressed upon. That is, the very first thing is, are you kind of honest with yourself? So once again, it includes 5 different things. And also, can you be honest in the relationship to others? And here also there are 5 points. And when listening to Krishnamurti, as far as I felt when he was giving talks alone by himself, and was talking alone, he seemed to be very, very precise with honesty. In a very deep way, you have to looking for the etymological meaning of the words. Probably, I don't know if he has any hope, but maybe he hoped that listeners had the same understanding of these words. But it took so much time in deconstructing the meaning of the words, so that for the audience, what he would say would be as clear as possible. Even though till the end of his life, and very close to the end of his life, he told once to Scott Forbes, who was the principal of the school in Brockwood for some years, but Scott went with him for these last 6 months and stayed with him every day and night. So at the end of his life, Krishnamurti told Scott, he said, nobody has ever understood what I've been talking about for 60 years, which is dramatic. So we hope some people have understood, but they stay anonymous. Just a hope. I don't know. So it tried to be so precise with the meaning of the words, and this is what I call kind of honesty, so that what he would say was clear in his mind, hoping that the listeners would take the words as clear as he was. And this has to go, that's the way I look at it. There is a link in between the two first points of Raja Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga, the ethical way of life, with oneself and in relationship with others. Others in the classical yoga doesn't mean only people. It means whatever is outside of what I call me, including nature. So that means including animals, plants, minerals, wind, everything that is outside, that is considered to be outside. And the first two limbs, anga means limbs, parts, are not to be taken as only practical behaviors, but also they have to be taken as doorways to that state of unity. So quite often in the books where there are comments on this Yoga Sutra, translators or commenters are taking it as exercises. But this is, for me, this is very, very clear. The ethic is a doorway to the state of unity, which has to go through the silent mind. So that is only those ethical behaviors in the relationship to outside or the relationship to ourselves inside are ways for entering into the silent mind. And they are not wholly a morality. And if you remember, sometimes Krishnamurti was kind of pointing morality. Sometimes he used to say there is no morality in the world, and sometimes he said morality is not the point. So I think we have to understand this. I make a difference in the words. I call it ethic on one way and morality. Morality has to do when you conform to the law or the direction, the rules of societies. Ethic is not about conformity. Ethic is a search into what does it mean, for example, to be harmless, to be peaceful. What is it? For example, the first, they are called yam and niyam, or yamas and niyamas. So the very first one is called ahimsa, which you know, because Gandhiji has so much used that. So what does it mean? What does it mean to be not to hurt, not hurting. Not to a particular object, but what does it mean to be in a state where we don't hurt? And when studying into the Yoga Sutra and going as deep as possible, as Krishnaji always invited, I always say, go, take whatever you want and go deep and deep and deep into it. So when we go as deep as possible into this ahimsa, what we discover is that the only state into which it's impossible to hurt is only when the mind is silent. No other way. So when we go into it, there are three different directions, which is not hurting with your physical body, not hurting with the speech, not hurting with the thought. And then from there are other different possibilities of deepening the meaning. And at the very end, there is a fourth state, which is, at the very end, it means for not hurting in any ways, the only possibility is when the mind is completely silent. There's no other way. When you come to the second, which is called Satya, truthfulness, or we could call it truth, which was again a theme upon which Krishnamurti so much insisted all his life. So what do we mean by truth? So here again there is the three levels. It means to be true in your behavior, physically. To be true when you speak, so let's say not lying. And to be true in your thinking, that is, no confusion. But at the very end, there is this fourth state where you can only be, maybe not truthful, but you can only be the truth itself when the mind is silent. And you can only be the peace itself when the mind is silent. So here there is we could say, a kind of shift from the idea of becoming and the fact of being, which is also a very important theme in Krishnamurti talks. Becoming means, for example, when we take Satya, not to be confused in our thought. So most of us, when we listen to Krishnamurti talks, he shows us the importance of this. How important it is not to be confused in the thinking. But for us, it is a process of becoming. That is, how do we move from being confused to not confused, which is a process for us as we understand it, which has to do, once again, with becoming. And how is it to be, what is the process in between being violent and becoming non-violent? So in the yoga teaching, there are quite many, we could say, ways for going through the processes. How to go from violence to non-violence. But the very last or deepest or highest level of ahimsa has nothing to do with the thought, the speech, and the behavior. It has to do with a completely silent mind, which means a complete silent mind is peace. But the process is trying to become peaceful. Same thing with truth. The silent mind is truth. But the process is for becoming truthful. And here there's always a kind of gap with Krishnamurti, because he seemed, I say he seemed, but for me it's not, that's how he was. But let's say he seemed to be in that state, in this fourth state. And I remember many, many times looking at him, talking. That's a personal perception. I felt that he was making kind of effort for being understood. And sometimes he used to say, or bringing his eyes up. I don't know if he was catching something higher, I have no idea. But I remember several little group meetings. Sometimes we see on the video, we say, please, please, do you understand? Are we together? Do you follow? Because I suppose he felt that people couldn't follow. And as far as I, let's say, perceive or understand, there might be a gap in between the state where there is no fragmentation and the state of fragmentation, which sometimes he said there is no relationship. If you remember in some videos, sometimes we hear that, most of the time he was putting it as questions, but sometimes not. He used to say, there's something completely different. Nothing to do with what we know, beyond knowledge. So when we start studying the very first parts of yoga, this is what it is about. Is it possible to move from division to non-division? And apparently from Krishnamurti talks, even though sometimes he said it's very easy, very simple, but how is it now? Nobody ever understood what he said. Was he not good in explaining? You know how much education was important for him. That's the reason of this place. So that's the question. Was he a good educator? Or did he fail? And sometimes that's what he used to say. He never say I failed. He always say they don't understand. But maybe there is no possibility to move from division to non-division. But listening to him is one thing, and I remember being close to him. That was something completely different. As if the presence of him was kind of spread him that perfume of non-division. To me, it was, and it is, such a big difference being physically with this man or listening to the videos or reading his books. Even though he said the man has no importance, study the teachings. That's a question I haven't got any answer. Because once again, being close to him was, things were becoming clear. I dare not to say by miracle, but what I can say is that I wasn't the same one. We didn't understand how it was that things became very clear when he was there. But it was the case. So I don't want to make an image of him, because he was very much again what he called gurus, and that what he meant by that was people who impose something on others. But he was considered for many, many people the guru of gurus. And sometimes some journalists put that question. I remember an American journalist who asked him, and he didn't answer. He didn't say yes, but he didn't say no. So anyway, these two first points are very much, in the way I perceive yoga on one side and Krishnamurti talks on the other side, are very much together. The next point in Ashtanga yoga is relationship to the body. In the Yoga Sutra it is called Asana. And here again, many translators or commenters have translated asana as a body position. But, well, you know, asana means a pillow, a cushion, what we are sitting on. And so it means a state where I call it the body matter is seated. That is a state where the body matter is quiet, is not moving. I don't know why. The definition that is given in Yoga Sutra, which is state of unity, appears when the mind is quiet or silent. I don't know why today the silent mind has been translated into moving the body. For me, that's a kind of betrayal. As asana doesn't only mean twisting your limbs on a carpet. It means the relationship to body matter. So here again, Krishnamurti used to talk about this, to take care of the body. And I remember him being very careful. I remember one day in Saanen, in Switzerland, where he came for maybe 20 years, talking for about 3 weeks. So the place where the big tent was set was close by a small airport, tourist airport, where they had a lot of, how do you call it, gliders. This plane where there is no engine. And one day, somebody from the airport came to him and said, "Sir, I'd like to offer you 1 hour on that kind of plane." And he said, "Thank you, but no, I will not." So the man was very surprised because when you invite for this, you take it. I mean, it's attractive. And he asked him, why? And he said, I'm not allowed to put my body in danger. In the same way, when sometimes people asked him, what is the source of your teaching? He used to answer, I cannot talk about it. Sorry, he used to answer, I don't know, but anyway, I'm not allowed to talk about it. So we can ask ourselves, what does it mean? Is there something or somebody or some, I don't know, energy that would be above him and that would say, don't talk about the I-ness or who I am? But regarding the body, I remember that very clearly. He said, I'm not allowed to put the body in danger. And I know he was practicing asana. He had two asana teachers. First, both of them are worldly known. First one was Iyengar, BKS Iyengar. You might have heard about him. He was in Pune. And he took classes with him. I don't know for how long. Until one day he went to see Iyengar's teacher, who was Krishnamacharya. And Krishnamacharya was living very close to Vasanta Vihar in Chennai, 20 minutes walk. So he went to him and said, Sir, I would like to study Asana with you. And Krishnamacharya said, I will not be your teacher, but I will send you my son, who became very famous too, Desikachar. So he sent his son, and I remember Desikachar, I met him, telling us how it was. So he went to Vasanta Vihar, and of course Desikachar was young. Krishnamurti was very well known already all over the world. So young Desikachar was little uneasy. How do you teach such a person? I will tell you a personal story about this. Because once I was asked to teach asana to Krishnamurti too. At the end it didn't happen. That's another story. So when Desikachar arrived, Krishnamurti has prepared the teacher carpet, the student carpet, was waiting for the teacher, salute him, pranam, waiting for Desikachar to sit. And then Krishnamurti sat also. And his father had told him, for the first lesson, don't teach him anything. Ask him to show what his asana practice is. So Desikachar, the young Desikachar, asked Krishnaji, said, show me what you've been doing up to now. So he did it, and the lesson was over. Desikachar went back home, told his father, and his father said, okay, now you're going to teach him something different. There is something that he has to stop, something that has to be changed, something that has be left forever, and there are a few new things you have to teach him. So second lesson, Desikachar came and told Krishnamurti, say, my father said you have to stop this and this and this and this. And Desikachar told us that Krishnamurti stopped immediately. He never went back to it. And when listening to to Krishnamurti, sometimes he said, can you end something completely, definitely? It seems that that was one of his ordinary possibilities, to end and not coming back, which is something for me very touching when I listen to Krishnamurti, when he says, stop, end, put an end. And sometimes when he talks about ending, what comes after is the relationship to death. When he talks, not always. Now, in the asana practice, this is one very important point, which is today completely forgotten. Asana teachers today, most of them, I don't want to criticize, but they're mainly after doing and doing and doing and doing and doing. But the main point in asana is you start from a movement and you stop it and you end it. So asana has to be understood as ending physical movement. And here again, ending physical movement is understood as a doorway to a silent mind. But the way I perceive it is not ending the physical movement, is ending the relationship to body matter, which is something different, which requires, we could say, meditative state. The next step is called pranayama, that is playing with the breathing exercises. And here again, when you deconstruct the word pranayama, at one time it has to do with death, yama, and I am also. So, and it has to do with the life breath itself. And into the practice, what is important in pranayama is not the inhaling and exhaling, is what we call kumbhak, that is the suspension in between, that is when the breath stops. So we all have, of course, when we breathe in, after inhalation, there is, of course, slight movement when there is no movement. Then exhalation, slight movement when there is no movement. But the big point in pranayama, and this is very clear, is not inhalation, exhalation, and those suspensions. Teaching are talking about another or third type of suspension. And into the third type of suspension, it means being taken over by the life breath itself. Technically, they call it kevala kumbhaka, but it is to be taken over by the life force itself, which, when listening to Krishnamurti, I always, not always, but that's what I hear from time to time, saying there is an extraordinary energy process. It doesn't say process, as far as I remember. That exists. And here again, is there a link in between activating the breathing and breathing ending? And when listening to Krishnamurti, for me this isn't clear. I don't know if what he meant was that there is a possible shift from one to the other, or there is no movement from one to the other. The next point in yoga is called pratyahara, which is, very often translated as bringing the senses within, inside. So what it means, again, is that generally our senses are attracted by what is going on outside. And when Krishnaji is talking about this, he always says, be aware with all your senses of what is going on, not only outside, but inside. That might be a link also in between. I'm not sure. Because pratyahara, in yoga there are practices, exercises. So a big difference with Krishnamurti talk, because he always says there is no practice. Which apparently didn't mean that we don't have anything to do, but it seems to mean that there is something else that we cannot practice. And there's something else, for me, is a mystery. I can't put any word on it. Next part in yoga is what we call dharana, concentration. So here again, it's a big point. What we learn when we practice dharana as a practice is playing with different intensities of concentration. When the intensity is too big, we are in tension. That is, concentration is a very big point regarding Krishnamurti teaching, as far as I understand. It is the relationship in between the subject and the object. That is, when I concentrate on something, on an object. And then there is this duality, this differentiation in between what I call the me and what I call the object. The object. And that's a big point in Krishnamurti's talks, because he had repeated again and again and again and again that this brings division in the mind when you concentrate on an object. So what we learn practically in yoga is how to reduce concentration until it moves to what we call dhyan, meditative state, which is understood as a state where the mind is relaxed. So here again, in yoga, it's always about becoming. How to move from duality or relation in between subject and object to non-duality, where subject and object are, as Krishnaji always pointed, together. And that's the next step that is translated meditation, which doesn't have the same meaning as Krishnamurti used it. So I don't call it anymore meditation. Sometimes I call it meditative state or contemplation. That is, I relate to something, whatever the thing is, and I reduce the intensity so that there is no more movement from me to that thing, but there is a kind of contemplation where there is two movements. One movement is from what I call me to the object, and the other movement simultaneously is from the object to me. And this is what we call dhyan in Sanskrit. Meditation. I rather prefer to call it contemplation. And then comes the very last state, the eighth doorway, which in Sanskrit, in yoga, we call it samadhi. Sam means adequate, same. Which is said that there is a state where the division in between what Krishnamurti called the watcher and the watched has disappeared, and has disappeared beyond time and space. So in our mental understanding, we could say forever or for eternity, and with no limitation in the space, which is something Krishnamurti was so much talking also. Now my feeling is he was talking from that state. And in yoga, all those different 8 doorways, in each of them, the very last or the most subtle side of these doorways is always that quality of timeless and spaceless freedom. And remember, one very, very important word in yoga is moksha, which means freedom. Well, we translate it as liberation, but I suppose that's what Krishnaji was talking about when he said, don't follow any authority. Could be a person, could be an idea, could be a law, could be a society. Don't follow. It's about pure freedom. So these are, for me, the different links I can see in between classical yoga and Krishnamurti vocabulary and what he was talking about. And I know that he was practicing asana, but it took asana practice as something for maintaining body health, nothing else. He also did some pranayama. And I remember again Scott Forbes, who told me during the last 6 months of Krishnaji, when Scott was close to him, one day Krishnamurti taught him asana. And another thing I remember, Krishnaji was practicing daily a method from an American doctor called Bates for maintaining a good sight with his eyes. He never wear glasses. But he was doing it every day. And I remember Scott telling me, he said, the day before he died, he was still doing his exercises. He said, I have been it was not his words, it's the way I understood. I've been given a body and I have to take care of it. So I take care of it, even if I die. I don't know if he knew when he was going to die. But I was so surprised when I was invited to teach Asana in Brockwood, because I thought, when listening to him, because he was so much criticizing teachers, or what he called gurus, I was so surprised that Asana could exist in such a school. But it has a very clean, clear place. There have been a few dialogues with gurus. I remember one of them, he was a Tibetan Rinpoche, very well known. I can't remember his name right now. He was very famous in the States. You don't know? Well, he was very famous. And I remember the video starts, it lasts 3 minutes. So it starts like this. Krishnamurti says, "Sir, can we question what meditation is?" And this Tibetan Rinpoche start immediately saying what it is. And Krishnamurti, it lasts maybe less than 3 minutes. It just says, stop the video. And that's it. I forgot the name of this man. And I remember another video with Goenkaji. Goenka was a businessman from Mumbai. He was running a huge company they were selling threads, if I will remember. And Goenka met a monk in Burma, if I will remember. You remember his name? No, not him. Ubakin, yeah, Ubakin. And who said, we remember what Buddha taught as a practice, vipassana. And progressively Goenka stopped his job. I met him when he was still the businessman, the manager. I remember his building in Mumbai. And slowly stopped all his business and started teaching all over the world this vipassana method. And I remember there is a video of dialogue in between these two. And it's very beautiful because Goenka didn't claim to know anything. And they were questioning together. And very quickly, there is that's personal, there's an extraordinary sensation of space that is opening just by watching the video. And there is this book, Tradition and Revolution, that's it, where we can read Krishnamurti having dialogues with what we could call gurus or instructors or teachers from different traditions and points of view. And some of those dialogues are extraordinarily deep, very, very deep. So what I perceive when he was criticizing gurus, I remember him once saying, don't listen to gurus, whatever the length of their beard is. And as far as I understood, what he meant was, don't put yourself under the authority of somebody else. And if you meet somebody who wants to have authority upon you, run away. It is not the way to go. And of course he was very sharp. This morning again I was listening a video which is, it was in 78 in Saanen, into which at one time he says, don't follow gurus with their chant and their dance. Because in those days we had this Rajneesh who was very much everywhere in India. Every city you have a Rajneesh center, and in the West everywhere. So quite a big group used to come to Saanen, all dressed in orange. They have the photo on the mala, and they were chanting and dancing at the entrance of the big tent. And everyone was, not everyone, but people who were very close to Krishnamurti. There was quite a number of people who were very bourgeois around him, old people from England, most of them. And they were very shocked to see all those young people chanting and dancing. So at one time in this video I watched this morning, he said that, but that was precisely in 78. In those days, they were coming. And yes, he was very much criticizing people who had a lot of authority on disciple. And he himself was pretty much talking about discipline. And in yoga there is always this, this is very important, the relationship in between guru and shishya. Shishya is translated in English as a disciple. And when it is badly understood, which is very often the case, means the master has a big influence on the disciple. But when you go deep into the Guru-Shishya relationship, what we discover, it is that it's a relationship based on what I call discipleship. The state of discipleship is the state of listening. The position of a disciple is a position of being manipulated. Now, when we go into, for example, into the Yoga Sutras, deeper than the very superficial, sometimes, translation, or when we think by ourselves into this, we discover that it is a relationship into which the one that is called the master, the guru, his main state is deeply listening to the one who is called the disciple, for perceiving deeply. And the main thing with disciple is the same thing, is listening deeply to where the master explanations are coming from. And in fact, it is understood as learning together, which is again the point of Krishnamurti. Because for me, there's no doubt that when he was sitting on the platform and we were listening, even if he used to say very often, "Are we together?" The most difficult thing was to be together with him. That is, even if he said, "Don't follow," we were following. What he was saying, and from time to time it seems to be a structure. Especially when we listen to 5 or 6 videos, his talks, for example in Saanen, he came talking every 2 days. So when you listen a series of them, I perceive a structure in the theme, because they all end at the same point, all the time. The last one is always about death and meditation. And by the end of his life, it was about we are the world. So there might be a pedagogy here, might be. So, but he was so much insisting, saying, "Are we together?" So we all try to follow what he said, and sometimes he used to say, "Words are not important." So, what is important? Being together. So, it meant, how can I, which is separated, being together with this character, this man, who might be the embodiment of togetherness. How to do? And it was terrible, because you always say, "There's no how." Only one time he told me, "You're right, sir." He was so much pushing questions and questions and questions. And I couldn't stand anymore, so I shout out, "I don't know." Say, "You're right, sir." So I was very happy. But I was lost still. So for me, there are many points. I could say, even for sure, you would have been reluctant to being defined to with a particular word, but I could say that for me he was a real yogi. Not real, was a perfect yogi. Because talking with Mary Zimbalist, who was a secretary for 20 years, and they stayed together constantly. She always said there is absolutely no difference in between what he says and the way he lives. He is the embodiment of his teaching, which means there is no division, no fragmentation. And for her it was pretty tough. And there is this big question of memory, for example. I remember Mary Zimbalist told me a story about this. when they were in Pine Cottage in Hohai, she had bought the house long time ago. She was pretty well off. And so one day she was walking in the main room and she heard Krishnamurti talking in his room. So she worried. She thought somebody else came in the room. So she went in the room and he looked at her and he said, "Who are you?" She was puzzled because they have been together for years and years and years. So it seemed that from time to time, this man seemed to have no memory, even physical memory, which is so strange. Because apparently he had no psychological memory. We all know, if we have read his biographies, he had a very strange childhood and teenagers, and he was under the pressure of Theosophical Society teachings. And he always said, "This has never left any imprint in my memory." So apparently he had no psychological memory, but listening to Mary's Zimbalist, it seemed that he had sometimes no physical memory. And another time I remember she heard him talking again in his room. She didn't step in, but later on she understood he was talking to a poster where there was a tiger on it, a big photo. And he was telling to the poster, "Be careful, and they are really dangerous, they want to kill you and this and that." So she asked him and said, "What is this?" Oh, he said, "I was just talking to the global tiger consciousness." All right. So I feel there is a dimension into Krishnamurti which is beyond humanhood. And I remember into the story of the Buddha, into this, forgotten the name of this booklet, talking about the 1,000 life, or 1,000 previous lives of the Buddha. Forgot the name, title. But in his life there are stories like he went teaching to non-human beings. So it's always difficult to understand what is meant. So sometimes we found that he was talking to trees, to plants, talking to animals. But there are other things where I remember in Dehradun, in North India, there is a big Buddhist temple which is dedicated to Buddha's teaching to devas, non-material beings. And the temple itself, at the end of the temple, we can see a big statue of the Buddha going down. There is a kind of stairs, so coming down from, I don't know, heaven or wherever. So I just question, was Krishnamurti also linked to other type of sentient beings? Because if there is no division, there is no division. Then the last thing was about energy. He sometimes talked about, he never really talked about, he just mentioned that there was an extraordinary energy. Is it the movement of life itself? In tantric texts, in the classical yoga, we don't find anything about this. But in tantric texts, in the tantras are texts, there are a few references to this, talking about the life energy itself, and saying that the state of yoga is that state, is that energy. There is no difference in between that universal energy and the word yoga. For me, this is beyond my understanding. I just don't know what it is about. Don't know if we've gone to all the points.
Yeah, I think so. I think almost we are at the end of the
Yeah.
6:30.
Thank you for putting questions, because I was really wondering what am I going to talk about? I have no idea.